İngilizce bir sunumumuz olacak. Paritize uygulamasını tekrar hatırlatayım size. Paritize uygulamasını indiriyorsunuz, Marketing Meetup yazıyorsunuz, Connect'e basıyorsunuz ve tercüme başlıyor. Peki, eğer hazırsak alkışlarınızla Dr. Michael Wu'yu sahneye davet ediyorum. Michael, please come to the stage. Hello.
Hello.
Thank you. You came from San Francisco, right?
Yes.
Okay. It's a really nice place, and I've been in there for several times. Today, you will be presenting and talking about how to design a better customer experience by using the data, right?
Yes, that's part of it.
Wow, a part of it.
Yeah.
So you have more content than that.
Probably.
Great. Okay, stage is yours, sirs.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me to be here again in Istanbul with such a great audience here. So, as you can see, today I will be talking about, this laser pointer is not working very well here, huh? Okay, the science and strategy behind a good customer experience. So, just let me, so if you want to tweet, feel free to tweet and follow me on LinkedIn. Before I begin, just let me ask you a very, very simple question. Why do you think customer experience is so important? Think about this for a sec. Anybody want to volunteer to answer? Don't be shy. Yeah, it's okay. Why is the customer experience so important? Yes? What you do is for customer, right? In short, the answer is very simple. It's good for business, right? If you give customer a good experience, they will return for more business. And actually, Watermark Consulting have done this analysis for us over 8 years of stock performance. And they compare the leaders of customer experience to the market average. And guess what? The leaders does better. And they also compare that to the laggers of in customer experience. And guess what? The laggers do worse. Okay? Very compelling data. If you provide a good customer experience for your customer, it's good for your business. Okay, so let me ask you a next question then. If customer experience is so important, why do you think, what makes a customer experience good? What makes experience a good experience? Any thoughts on that? Simple, right? Okay, all these are somewhat correct, okay? But the answer is also very, very easy. The answer is simply you have to deliver more than the customer expects. That's all, right? If the customer expects 5 minutes, you deliver it in 4 minutes, that's better, right? So, in some rough sense, not very, very scientific, because I'm a data scientist, I can be very, very, neurotic about numbers. But in some rough sense, customer experience is just the difference between what you deliver and what the customer expects, right? So in graphic, it's really, really easy. If your customers are actually expecting at this level and you deliver at this level, you are going to have a satisfied customer. But if you deliver more, you're going to have delighted customer. If you deliver less than that, your customer is going to be disappointed, right? Very easy. So most of you probably work in a big brand, and you have been delivering your product and services for maybe 50, 100 years. And you are doing that the same for the last, improving, of course, right? But the problem today is that the customer expectation have actually risen. So even though you've been delivering the same thing, right, you're still going to end up with a disappointed customer. So basically, what does this tell us? This basically tells us that, customer experience is really relative to what they actually expect, right? So we actually asked Nielsen to conduct a survey of 300 company CEO with revenue greater than 1 billion. And guess what they say? My customer expectations are higher than 3 years ago. Customer expectations are increasing every year. We've been spoiled by our mobile devices, spoiled by our apps, our phones, and all the messenger, all the mobile apps that we have. That's why customer expectations have risen, okay? So now, customer experience is relative to customer expectation. So today, we are going to talk about relativity. Let's be Einstein, okay, a little bit. So relativity actually have space and time. We are going to talk about space and time. So the customer experience framework, this is actually a framework that I developed for part of my work. And I think it will be a very useful framework for all of you to take back to your organization to understand customer experience and measure it and communicate it, okay? So this customer experience framework has two components. It has a spatial dimension, tells you where things happen, and it has a temporal dimension, a time dimension, that tells you when things happen. Now, the time dimension is really just the customer's journey, right? Basically, it has, basically tells you, when you're aware, when you're doing research, when you buy, when you use, when you get support, and when you actually share your experience. This is actually a very typical customer experience journey, right? A customer's journey. Now, the spatial dimension is actually where things got really interesting. This is because there's actually many of these spatial dimensions. This is actually where things happen, right? And there's actually three categories of them. One is basically we call this traditional channels, and there's digital channel, and there's also the mobile channels. Now, when you go from traditional channel, they actually include what we call physical locations, such as an event like this, right? To people, friends, actual friends, people, human, not robots, right? That we talk to, right? Print media that you could touch and pick up and read, right? These are what we call physical channels. And then they move us into an electronic age where we start to use TV and radio, right? And then even over the phone. So these are what we call electronic channels. We communicate with the brand and interact with the brand through those channels as well. After that, we have the digital channel. And most of you probably are very familiar with these digital channels. And they include, search engine, your website, right? Basically, these digital channels are replicating the physical channel in the digital space, right? Basically, your website is basically a digital version of your physical location, right? And your digital events are basically a digital version of your physical events. Same thing as digital content, which is actually basically a digitized version of your print medium. Now, all of you are very familiar with this. But after this, what happens? You start to move into what we call social channels, right? Social channel is actually quite different than the traditional digital channel. And we will actually look at some of their properties later on. Okay, so these include community of interest, customer community, social networks. And of course, today, we are moving into the mobile revolution as well. Now, the mobile revolution basically tried to replicate everything in the digital world as well. Just like digital channel tried to replicate the physical channel, right? Basically, I call this everything here is mobile, web, and social. Because today, you can access everything digital on your mobile device, right? Everybody can access all the digital interactions on their mobile device, okay? But what's new with mobile is that now you have apps. This is a new thing on mobile. You don't have that before in the digital world, right? And there's also these group-based chat. These are messenger apps like Line, WhatsApp, WeChat if you're from China, right? So basically, all these are group-based chat or messengers. Okay? So all these are new things in mobile. Now, when you actually cross the channel, the spatial channels with the customer journey, you basically create what we call touch points. This is all the touch point that the customer can interact with your brand, okay? Every one of this is every touch point. And now you can be very granular about the time dimension, right? For example, if you're selling a software, some people may be doing, during their research phase, they may be interested, they may be comparing product, they may be desired, and then they have a decision to make, right? And maybe when they're actually using the software, there's an install, run, and an upgrade phase. And likewise, when they get support, they may be getting support from multiple attempts. They may be try it once or twice, and then 3 or 4 times to get support, get help how to use their software. Likewise, you could also separate the digital channel in very granular as well, such as search engine. Maybe you may separate them into Google, Bing, Yahoo, and likewise for social community of interest, you may have YouTube, Instagram, blogs, and likewise for social network, you may have Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn, and so on and so forth, right? What's more amazing about this framework is that it's actually extensible. This is not all the physical space that we can actually interact with the brand, because new technology happens every day. Today, you see a lot of demonstration out there with augmented reality. In the future, maybe augmented reality will be an important channel for a customer to interact with the brand. And you basically just add that as one more spatial channel to your framework, okay? So now this is the framework, right? So I'm not gonna go into such a detail here. So let's look at the more coarse-grained framework. So when you talk about customer experience, you really mean the experience of the customer on every one of these touch points, everyone. Now, there's a lot of these touch points right here, right? Over 100 of them, probably, right? So this customer experience is such a big topic that actually there isn't a single person in the organization that's responsible for all of customer experience. There isn't one, okay? So now, if you are a digital marketer, which probably, presumably, a lot of you here are digital marketers, right? You probably care about this part of the framework. If you are, for example, if you have a store, you're a store manager, maybe you care about the in-store experience. If you are a mobile designer, maybe you're interested in that part of the framework. If you're a social strategist, maybe you're interested in this part of the framework, right? And likewise, if you are working in marketing or sales, you may be really interested in the pre-sales experience. If you are a product designer, package designer, you may be really interested in the out-of-the-box experience. If you actually design the product and service, you may be really interested in how people's experience actually when they're actually using your product. And likewise, if you are a VP of support, then you will care a lot about their support experience as well, right? So what does this tell you? Customer experience is not one person's job. It's everybody's job. Everyone in your company is responsible for some part of this customer experience framework. Okay? Make sense so far? Yeah. Okay, excellent. Yes, I like the interaction. That's great, Yeah, okay. Now, so customer experience, that is the framework. So once we have this framework, what does the customer's journey look like? What does customer's journey look like? Well, typically we know that it has to move forward in time, right? We can't roll back time, right? We can't go backward in time. Physics won't allow us to do that. But we don't hit all the touch points when we move forward in time, right? So basically, it looks more like this. It bounces around as we move forward in time. We go from one touch point to another one, so on and so forth, right? Now, this dot is actually moving across, very quickly. So I'm going to annotate that with you. For example, this customer, he actually saw your TV ad about your product, so he learned about it, and then he basically Googled for it, and then using search engine, and find out more about your product. He found a customer community to talk about your product, and then he eventually go to the store to check it out. And then after that, he actually go home and buy it on the website, right? And then when he actually buy the product, he basically use it in the physical world. So that's basically the only place we know how to use a physical product today, because we're not in the matrix yet. Someday we might, but not yet. And when he had problem using your product or service, again, he Googled for it first, right? And he found some customer community that maybe have some answer, but eventually he defined that the community is not able to answer his question. So he called an agent to help him. And then finally, after he get help from his agent, he shared his experience on social network or his WhatsApp online, these group-based chat, these messenger apps. So this is a very stereotypic customer journey, right? Going through different touch points, all right? Now, as I mentioned before, customer experience is relative to the expectation. So we have to understand a little bit about the science behind how do expectations form. What is it that causes people to create certain expectations? So one thing we have to understand is that people tend to compare things that are similar, that are very more similar, right? The more similarity you have, the more likely you are to compare with them each other, okay? So let me ask you, can you compare an apple and orange? Can you? Yeah, of course. Why not, right? I mean, should you? Should you compare? Why not? Why not? You can definitely compare. You could compare the vitamin levels of apple versus orange, right? You could do that. Most people probably wouldn't, but you can, right? How about a fish and an apple? You probably still can, but most probably wouldn't, right? Right? How about an apple and a cat? Probably you wouldn't do that, right? In theory, you can actually do it, right? But you probably wouldn't, right? So you get the idea, right? The more similar things are, you tend to compare them. You tend to compare them, right? The interesting thing is that when the variance or diversity or the attribute that makes them similar has a variance of 1, that's when you expect them to be the same. Okay, what does that mean? The variance of diversity equal to 1. What does that mean? That means if you only know one kind of apple, then you would expect them to taste, smell, and feel exactly the same because you only know one kind of apple. The minute you know 2 kinds of apple, one is a Washington apple, the other one is a Fuji apple, then you would not expect them to be the same because you have 2 names for it. You may still compare them because they're very similar, but you would not expect them to be the same. Got that idea? Okay? Now, okay, what is the business implication of that? What is the business implication? The business implication is that, like, experience from the same company, people expect them to be the same. How many Turkcell is there? I know of only one. How many Dennis Bang is there? I know of only one, right? Experience from the same brand, people expect them to be the same, okay? And another thing is that experience through the same technology, people expect them to be the same, right? If you're actually using Twitter to support your customer, then your consumer will expect you to respond just like how their friends would respond to them on Twitter. Fast, immediate, like within the hour, within the minute. That's what they expect. Okay? People expect a consistent experience with the same brand. Okay? Same experience because it's only one brand. Okay? Now, with that in mind, we can understand how do bad experiences arise? Why do bad experiences happen? Why do you think that happens? Okay? So, bad experiences arise when there are inconsistencies in experience. And these inconsistencies is what we call experiential gap. Okay? Now, there's actually one classic experiential gap that all of you probably have experienced sometime in your life or really understand it. One, this is what we call the pre-sales and post-sales gap, right? Before you buy my product and service, I'm going to be extremely nice to you. I'll do everything you said. But after you buy my product, don't talk to me, right? Because it costs me money every time you call me, right? So this is what we call the pre-sales, post-sales experiential gap. But there's many, many more of this, right? For example, you may go to this really nice, modern-looking website to reserve a taxi, but what comes to pick you up is this. It's not what you expected, right? Okay? So that's experiential gap, but there's many, many more, right? For example, you have a really well-organized website, but, it's totally not responsive on social network, right? You may even have a really amazing TV ad that wow people, but then the review on social media and community are really, really bad. These are inconsistencies, right? You may even have a really lively, vibrant customer community, but you are not even on mobile, okay? So these are what we call inconsistencies, right? When you move from one touch point to another touch point, the experience is not the same. These create what we call experiential gap, okay? Now, where should you focus to fix the problem? As I said before, this is a really, really big framework, right? There's so many grids. Where should you focus, right? That depends on your strategy, right? We can actually use some of the properties of these channels to help us understand where we want to focus. For example, if you actually look at the spatial temporal properties of these channels, you would know that the physical channels are physically localized and they're synchronized, right? You have to be here at this time in order to listen to the speaker speak at this conference. Spatially localized right here, temporally synchronized. You have to be here now, right? Otherwise, you miss it. It's gone, right? Okay, so when we actually go into print medium, right, starting with print medium, analog, and the electronic age, right, things start to be dispersed because it's print medium, you can mail them across the world, right? So you can actually consume them in a much more dispersed way, and mostly synchronous, right? Print medium, not really, because you could read them anytime, right? But once we move into the digital world, it's really, really interesting because now it's dispersed, but also asynchronous. you could watch this conference a year later on the digital channels, right? You couldn't do that in the physical world, right? So now what happened when we move into the mobile world, right? The mobile world is so dispersed that it's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. We pretty much have our phone with us pretty much everywhere. You know, if we have in fact, they probably have now a waterproof phone, right? I guess people will take them in the shower nowadays, right? Okay, so what does this tell us? This tells us that, basically that mobile actually has the widest reach. So if your goal is to reach the widest audience, that's where you want to make sure your experience is good along these mobile channels, right? But there are other properties, such as, the peer interaction, peer influence property on this channel. On the traditional physical channels, these interactions are transient, meaning that if you miss it, it's gone, okay? They're not tracked. They're hard to track. They're very difficult to track, right? And even if they're tracked, they're not public. Not everybody can see it, right? So, and what's more interesting is that once you start with print medium, right, you can actually track them. Anybody know how the people track print medium? What do they use to track print medium? Like coupon codes or QR codes, right? This is how you track people are consuming these things, right? So, but still, they're not opaque, even in the digital world, right? Google tracks every search word that you search for, but it's not public. Not everybody else in the world knows what you search for, right? Maybe they don't want to know, okay? But once you get to social, it's really interesting because now it's persistent, definitely trackable. You could track everything on social, but it's also transparent, meaning it's public. Once you tweet something on Twitter, it's going to stay there pretty much forever until you decide to delete it, right? Now, this is really interesting because this social actually includes the mobile social, right? Includes that part. Once we get into the mobile world, something really interesting happens, okay? It's definitely trackable. Everything on your mobile phone is trackable, but it's selectively transparent. And some of it is actually opaque. Some of it is actually not public, right? For example, if I trying to set up a hiking picnic with my friends on WhatsApp, the rest of the world don't have to know about it. They won't see it, right? So what does this tell us about social channel? Social channel actually, have the strongest peer influence, right? You've seen that if you actually, as I showed you earlier, if you actually give people a really, really good customer experience, customer become loyal, right? But what does loyalty mean? Loyalty is not the end state here. Loyalty is not just at the end. Loyalty means that you revisit this journey over and over again. That's what loyalty means, okay? You probably won't visit the journey right all the way at the beginning, but you will probably visit them right before you buy, right? You may do a little bit of research before you buy the new product, but you're probably already aware of the brand, right? You revisit this journey. Now, you probably have also heard that customer service is the new marketing. Why? This is why, right? Because before they will buy from you next time, you better serve them right. You better support them and service them right. You have to serve your customer right in order to earn the right to market to them again. Otherwise, good luck trying to market to them. Good luck making them trying to buy again. They're not going to do it, okay? If you have a bad support experience, they're not going to buy from you again, okay? All right. Okay, so these are strategy, right? Based on what you're trying to accomplish, you could use this property, this framework to help you understand how you should strategize where you want to focus. But there's also a data approach to this, where you should focus. Since I'm a data scientist, right, so I might as well talk about data. Anybody data science here? Some are. Excellent, okay? So I have shown you a customer's experience earlier, right? It looks like this. Remember this picture? I showed you earlier this, right? I even tell you the story behind it, right? Now, what happened when you try to map the customer experience for another customer? Would it look exactly the same? No, right? It may look something like this, right? What happens if you map it for another customer? It will look something slightly different again, right? Now, what happens when you map this customer experience journey for many, many customers? What will happen? You may start to look something like this, right? Now, do you see something? Do you see some pattern? What's the pattern you see? Nobody see anything? You start to see that there are some touch point that's heavily visited, right? There's some touch point that every customer goes through, right? These are the touch point that a lot of customers go through this touch point. So these are the touch point that you should focus on to make sure that you have a good experience, because this is where you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck. Okay? You get your money worth. So now, these are the touch points where you need to quantify whether the customer experience is good or bad. Okay? So let's say we get this data. Okay? For example, if I get some data about the customer experience, I may say that, okay, here, the usage of the product is not so good, but not too bad. I do pretty well, right? And I'm doing pretty good on my digital channels. I'm doing pretty good on my communities of interest, but I'm not doing too well on my customer community. I'm doing okay in my social network or my messenger apps. So this will tell you where you should focus. Where should you focus? Here and here, right? Focus on your customer community, building your customer community, right? Maybe a little bit on how to use your product, okay? Now, I kind of hand wave over those data, right? How do you get those data? How do you think you get those data at the beginning? You have to ask your customer, right? And there's actually a 3-step survey that you have to do, right? Basically, the first is the awareness question, right? I first learn about your product through which channel? And you have all the channel that I listed, right? And you just check one, right? So checking one doesn't tell you as much as whether they actually want to use a channel, right? Maybe you have one channel that you don't support. Maybe they actually want to do that, right? So you also need to ask their preference. I actually prefer using the following channels to do research, buy, or get support. And you could check all that applies, right? And then finally, you have to ask them the question, which one did I have used, right, to follow the channel? Which one of the following channel do I use to research, buy, or get support? And you check all that apply again, okay? And then finally, you have to ask them the experiential question, whether you are disappointed, satisfied, or delighted on the one that you check, the one they actually use, right? You wouldn't know if you did not use that channel, okay? So once you get those these survey results, you basically can figure out what the customer experience is, okay? So the survey response rate, as you know, is typically pretty low. Anybody done survey here? Anybody done survey? I'm sure some of you do, right? What's your typical response rate? No, you guys are very shy. Don't be shy with me. I don't bite. So. Huh? Average, yeah, average, how much? 60%. That's huge. That's very high. 10, right? Typically around, I would say around 10. I think today, using mobile, people are able to get it up higher. Okay, strangely, mobile seems to be, people tend to be a little bit more responsive on mobile, right? But typically, they are very, very low, right? So how do you get more data? So this is where big data and data science and machine learning can really help you, okay? Now, so here is where you need to start to think, what customer interaction data do you have and have lots of? Okay? Now, keep in mind, these are customer interaction data. The key word is actually the interaction. It's not actually customer, okay? Why? Because these are the data about the customer's interaction with you. It's the interaction with you that tells you whether you have a good experience or bad experience, right? Knowing your customer, whether they're male or female or their age, it's not going to tell you whether they have a good experience or not. But knowing how they interact with you will, okay? So what are some examples of these customer interaction data? So for example, product usage data, right? These are marketing engagement data, support center operation data, and even social media behavior data. How they actually interact with your product, with your marketing campaign, how they actually interact with your support center, right? All of these are interaction data with your brand, okay? Now, how do we turn these data into customer experience data? Turning customer interaction data into experiential data is actually not easy, okay? So let me just, this thing is actually not clicking. It's really weird. Okay, so let's say you have 10 million. Okay, this is actually too fast now. Okay? Okay. All right, let's say you have 10 million customer. Let's say you have 10 million customer, okay? So let's use a example where, so this actually is not responding. I don't know, is it because the slide or is it? Okay, okay, all right. Let me just talk through this because this is actually important, right? So let's use customer support as an example, okay? Because these are the customers who actually came to you for help, right? So you should have support center operation data about this customer, right? So these customers may consist of 50% of your customer base, right? So these are customers who came to you at least once throughout the entire lifetime, right? At any given time, there may be only a small fraction of the customer who actually come call you for help. But throughout the entire customer lifetime, right, the customer who asks you for help may be actually pretty high, maybe actually 50%, right? So these are the customers that you want to survey. You want to survey, so you have 10 million customers, let's say you have 50% of them come to you for help, right, throughout their entire lifetime, right, at least once, right? So you have 5 million customers that you want to survey. And we know that survey response data is typically very low, right? Let's say the worst case scenario, say 1%. So what do you have? You have about 50,000 customer experience data, right? 50,000, these red, a green or red one basically tells you like whether they have good experience or bad experience. Green means good experience, red means bad experience, okay? Now, how do you turn this data into, but keep in mind, you have a lot of data about these customers, right? You have 5 million data points about these customers who actually came to you for help. How do you turn this data into customer experience data? You need a model, right? You need a model. And there's actually many ways to come up with that model. One way is basically, you basically use, this is actually not responding very well. Okay, one way is you use a rule-based model. You basically describe what is a good experience. You may say, okay, if you call the call center, maybe if you waited 10 minutes, that's a bad experience. Waited 5 minutes, it's actually a good experience. But you also have data about whether the issue is actually resolved or not, right? If the issue is resolved, maybe 10 minutes is okay, right? If the issue is not resolved, then maybe 5 minutes is too much, right? But it also depends on what kind of customer you have. If I'm a premium customer, then my expectation is higher. I don't expect to wait so long, right? So my tolerance for wait is actually a lot lower, right? So basically, as more and more data you have, the rules that you come up with become very, very complicated. It becomes exponentially complicated. You can't even write them down, right? So this is where machine learning comes to help. So instead of writing these rules yourself, you show the machine what data consists of good experience and what data consists of bad experience, right? And you let the machine come up with a rule, right? So basically, these are the customer who basically told you that they have good experience, and you have what their support center operation data. You know what their support center data look like. And these are the people who told you they have bad experience, right? And you also have their support center operation data. So those can become training data for your learning algorithm. Your machine learning algorithm will basically come up with a rule that translates these support center operation data into customer experience data. So once you have that, don't forget you actually have 5 million customers that you have these data for, right? These data, you have 5 million customers for where you have these support center operation data. So what you do is that you need to feed these data into this model so that you actually can predict what the customer experience might be, okay? So these are examples, data such as wait time, handle time, what's the issue that you're calling about, right? So you feed all this data into this model, then you basically have what we call a predicted customer experience. Right, now you have basically whether these customers are delighted, satisfied, or disappointed. Okay, for 5 million people, not just 50,000. That makes sense so far? I see some blank faces here. Okay, all right. Don't worry if that doesn't make sense. Okay, so here's what you should do next, okay? All right, so first step, how do you use the framework? Is to identify what you're responsible for. Like I said, no one person in the company is responsible for the entire customer experience. You have to find out which part of the grid, which part of the framework are you responsible for. And then find out which part of the grid do you actually have data for, okay? Once you have those data, you need to survey and collect some data. And after that, you need to give it to the data scientist. If you don't know how to do that, right, hire data scientists like me. We'll help you do it, right? And you basically figure out that model that translates your support center operation data or marketing engagement data to your customer experience data, okay? So once you have that, you're not done yet. Remember, at the beginning, you have identified which part of the grid are you responsible for, right? The next step is that you have to share and disseminate. You have to tell people about your customer experience, right? So if you are a VP of support, right, you did this exercise. You basically fill out one part of the framework. You know how the customer experience on your support experience. Now you can actually go to your marketer and say, hey, marketers, are you over-promising, right? So that I cannot support it, right? So that I will create an experiential gap that create these bad experience, right? So this is actually a very good way to get other people in the company to fill out their part of the framework as well, okay? So once you have done this with enough people within the organization, hopefully you will have the entire customer experience. You have filled out entire part of the grid. And with that, you will have a very good understanding of people's customer experience. So let me just leave you with a couple more data points. This is the Sam Nielsen survey that we asked Nielsen to conduct for us. Basically, out of the 300 CEO that we interview, 79%, almost 80% of the CEO says that their products are being commoditized. Their products are being commoditized. The future battle will basically be on customer experience. 89% said that the future battle will be customer experience. Now, you had the framework, you had the measurement behind it, you know how to communicate about it, so go and win the battle. Thank you.
Michael, thank you very much for this valuable presentation. Thank you. You came from a long way, and we are really happy to host you here in Istanbul. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Evet, Michael matematiksel formüllere falan giriş yaptı.